Hi everybody, welcome to MacMind.io. My name is Johnny Mac. I'm a software professional and host of this channel. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm happy to share with you a little bit about a project I've been working on over the past few months. I've done a few videos on it. I've been reporting on adding a clock to the device, to the Raspberry Pi device, and then setting the time over Bluetooth, right? So this is a nice way that you can configure the time on your device if you don't want to set up an NTP server and you don't want to have the user interact directly with the device, right, to set the time. So you just set up a Bluetooth service. I've written a Bluetooth service in Rust, and then I can connect to the device over Bluetooth from my phone. I have a little app that I wrote in Swift to connect to the device with my phone, and then I can just set the time because my phone is synchronized over the cellular network, and that's a great way to do it. One of the features that I've added to the Pi that I was using for that project was this little RTC clock, right? And so this is a fun little component that you can add, right? It's just a little teeny hat. And I added this to my Pi4. Then I upgraded to a Pi5 and I installed the code on my Pi5. I used rpi-image-gen to build my image. I loaded it on my SD card, put it into the Pi, and it didn't work. The RTC clock didn't seem to be functioning as I was expecting, and so I got a little bit confused by that and had to go ahead and try to figure that out. And lo and behold, I'm learning about these things as I go. I'm not someone with years and years of experience with Raspberry Pi and the evolution of the Raspberry Pi. But what I discovered was that in fact the Raspberry Pi 5 has an RTC clock on board, okay? And here's an article, Pi Australia. This is an article that I found, and that is not what looks like an RTC clock. But if we scroll down here, it says the Raspberry Pi 5 introduces a brand new feature, the integrated real-time clock. This small but significant addition brings with it a host of capabilities, and in this blog post we'll delve into how you can get started. Okay, so what I then learned is that in fact you need this, which is a battery for the RTC clock. The Raspberry Pi 5 does not come with an onboard battery. And you can see this is actually a nice size battery, probably a little bit bigger than the battery here on this little module, right? And so that's interesting. Maybe this is the way to go, right? And we see here you can buy this RTC battery from on the Raspberry Pi website. And when we go to look and see for that at Micro Center, it's $5. Okay, $5. I got 5 of these little Hi-Let Go RTC clocks for $15, right? It's more expensive to get the battery for the Pi 5. And that's a theme. I know a lot of the other Raspberry Pi enthusiasts, hobbyists, YouTubers have been commenting on this lately, that it does seem that the motives of Raspberry Pi are shifting a little bit, and they're looking to maybe increase their margins or capitalize on their success. And good for them for having a great reputation and building good hardware. But it does make things a little more expensive when you're restricted to this specific solution, right, from Raspberry Pi. Okay, so where am I going with this? I decided to just go ahead and continue to use these little RTC clocks that I got from Amazon, okay? And that is absolutely possible on the Raspberry Pi 5, except you do need to make a few adjustments to the code. And so let's walk through that so you can see how to do it. Okay, so let's hop over to the code here and I'll just show you the changes. They're pretty minor, but again, significant because it does not work with this little RTC module that I purchased. First, what we're gonna do is we want to disable the onboard RTC clock on the Pi 5. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this Pi 5 configuration for my device. And then in my config text, I just added this down here at the bottom. So disable the onboard RTC, okay? DT overlay equals disable RTC, pretty straightforward. And then this is carried forward, right? Because we're gonna enable this module that we purchased, okay? Then also want to make sure, right, we're carrying forward this code too. So we're gonna go ahead and load these modules at boot time, I2C dev and I2C BCM 2835. Then what we want to do, right, is when we set the clock, okay, over Bluetooth, we need to make sure that we're specifying the correct device, okay? And so just disabling the onboard RTC is not quite enough. So we want to make sure that when we set the time, we specify the RTC right here, okay, to have RTC 1. All right, the default is going to be RTC 0. And so if we don't pass this parameter, it's not going to set the correct device. And then similarly, when we boot, we want to set the clock, the system clock, from the RTC module. And so on our sync service, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to specify the RTC, and that way when we boot, we set it correctly, okay? And that should be it. So let's go ahead and build this image and see if it works. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and load this onto our USB and see what happens when we load it onto the Pi. So let's go ahead now and pop this into our Pi5. So we can see here it is. Yay. And I've got some little heat sinks on there. And let's go ahead and plug this in. See what we see. It's booting up. Okay, great. So right off the bat, what we see is, let's just check the date right away, because with the RTC module here, I did test this. So theoretically, should be reading right away. And it looks like it's set to British Standard Time. It does look right, but it's set to British Standard Time. Okay, so that's interesting. So let's go ahead now and set it, but we're reading from the module, right? If we weren't reading from the module, then it would say 1970 or something. So we know that at least we're able to read from the module, which again, prior to these small code changes, that wasn't the case, okay? And so now if I set it here on my phone, let me see if I can set it to my time zone here. And I did, right? So I set it to Pacific time and that worked. So maybe let's see if we can reboot now and whether or not that's gonna maintain for us. So let's see if we can do that. And what we would hope and expect is that it's gonna maintain its knowledge of the current time. And it looks like it did. Great. And so that is confirmed. Another thing to mention is that I'm going to be experimenting with the Raspberry Pi 5 onboard RTC. I'm going to go and get that $5 battery because I have another Pi 5 here and I put this cooler on it, right? And so this cooler does inhibit me from actually attaching the RTC module, right, that I got for this, right? And so it doesn't actually go on here, right? This Pi 5 has an onboard RTC. I can use that. Furthermore, I feel like with this little RTC, if I did want to have another hat, right? So for example, the power over Ethernet hat, right? That might be a challenge. Now, if I was using power over Ethernet, that probably means I have internet connection. That probably means I can use the NTP server. But you get the point that this does take some real estate, and that's very limited on the Raspberry Pi. So using the onboard RTC clock is probably better. So once I get that little battery, I'll make a little video. It's probably very straightforward. It probably just works out of the box. That's what I'm hoping. Great, thanks for tuning in to this. I hope that's helpful. I know this isn't maybe a big deal to some of you, but these are minor details that I've been coming across. This project, I will say in closing, is part of a bigger project that I'm gonna do a video on. So it's pretty cool, and I'm gonna tie together some of the themes from many of the videos that I've been making using rpi-image-gen, things like splash screen and web kiosk and clock, and using the Bluetooth server to set the time and have all those things tie together. But I wanted to make sure I get this out because as I discover things, I want to try and share them. That was on my mind. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, never stop experimenting, challenging assumptions, and seeking the objective truth. If you like what you saw, please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out, helps others find this content. Comment on the repos if you're having some issues. Get in touch with me however you can through the comments or through those repos, and I'll be sure to reach back out. Thanks again, and have a great day.